Hey everyone, Coach Patrick here, Endurance Nation, back with another podcast interview. This is part of our series where we interview members of the team to learn more about who they are, capture some of their unique knowledge, and hopefully be a little entertained along the way. I usually focus on the entertaining part, so hopefully we'll make sure you learn. Our guest today, Mark Parascandola, who's joining us in the DC area, indoors for air quality today, but otherwise outside and adventuring all the time. Mark, how you doing?
Great. Good. Glad
Awesome.
to be here.
Super glad to have you. I was surprised when you came to our Mallorca camp this year and you were talking about, I've also been here. People are asking questions like, one time I did this camp, I've been thinking about riding here. And you were like, I've ridden there, I've ridden there. I've also ridden there, and I've ridden there. And I was like, okay, wait a minute. What's the backstory here? So today we're going to try and unravel a little bit of that, if that's okay.
Great. Yeah. Happy to share my story and experience. Yeah.
Okay, good. So first and foremost, why don't you just tell us who you are as an athlete today? What do you do? What do you race? So people have a baseline, and then we can start talking about adventure.
Yeah. So I've been racing. Actually, it was 15 years ago. I got my first road bike. So I was I was not someone who grew up doing sports and all that. I got into it a little later, which I think is maybe not so unusual for endurance athletes. When I turned 40, I got my first road bike and as a birthday present, and that sort of started me on this path of endurance sports. And so I started to get into triathlon. I've done 2 Ironmans, Wisconsin and Lake Placid. But really my initial motivation was always just about getting out and having fun. I think being on the bike is a great way to see the world, see places. And but then over the past few years, I think because of COVID and all that, I felt like I'd gotten a little off track with my training. And so I joined Endurance Nation last year, and it's been a great way just to connect with like-minded folks and get some motivation from the team. And so glad to be part of the community.
It's great to have you here. You're sort of like a community builder, I think, by nature. Like you're super outgoing, and whatever we're talking about, you've always got like a thing, like another thing, like, but also you could do this, or etc. So I'd love to unpack a little bit of that for you. So you got this bike for your birthday. Awesome. Which is like an entryway. Like how long did it take you as an adult onset adventurer to feel, I can ride this thing. I'm ready to go out and explore, whether it's getting off the beaten path and so on. Were you just pointed your bike in one direction and started riding, or how did that work?
Yeah, I had started doing longer and longer rides just on a hybrid bike that I had around DC area. And I decided I wanted to get a little more serious about it and really challenge myself. So I got a road bike. And then actually that same year, I signed up for this Trans-Pyreneese ride. So so it's like a training camp, but more like a cycling tour, but a really challenging cycling tour. The idea was you ride 70 to 90 miles a day, lots and lots of climbing every day for a week. You start on the Mediterranean side outside in Sitges, outside Barcelona, and end up on the Atlantic side near San Sebastian. And so that was a pretty challenging way to start. And I thought, so how do I even prepare for something like that? Because we don't have anything like the Pyrenees near where I live. So I went out to Skyline Drive and over the summer just tried to get in as much climbing as I could. And it was an awesome experience. I did the trip went great, although it was just the volume was a lot. And the last day I started to have an issue with my knee. And so I actually had to sit out some of the last day of riding, and which is a bit disappointing. But I think at that point, I realized also that I needed to do some really more focused training on the bike and just to be able to handle that volume. But it was a great adventure.
For sure. That's pretty beefy. Most people will get a bike and they're like, I think maybe I'll sign up for a century. That's like the normal, like level 1 aggressive, I would say, to go right to the Pyrenees and get into it. That's another thing altogether. So was it bike then Pyrenees trip, or did you have the Pyrenees trip on the radar and you're like, now I need a bike? How did that work?
No, I got the bike in early in the year. My birthday's in January, so that was my birthday present to myself. And then I think the trip was like in September, so I had the season to prepare for it. And then the other thing we did was we ended up in San Sebastian. It happened to coincide with the San Sebastian Film Festival. So it was great to do the ride and then have a week of just eating and watching films and recovering in San Sebastian. So I recommend combining the adventure with something else. Yeah.
For those of you at home listening, this is just straight up next level stuff, right? Most of us think about training and they're like, okay, I gotta go ride my bike. But Mark's not alone. We've had quite a few people who come to our Mallorca camp and then they're like, I'm over here. So if I'm going to fly all the way to the Europe, what else can I do when I'm here that would be interesting or see something that I might not otherwise see? And I'm always jealous of that. Like I never budget for that. I'm always like, I got to get back. I've only got so much time. I got to get back. So I love the idea of piggybacking. There's probably a much cooler sounding term than that, but sort of piggybacking those two together. That's very cool. I know people who've done both. Like some people have done sometimes people do this with marathons because those are just like one day events, right? They're like, oh, we'll go run the marathon and then sightsee or sightsee and run the marathon. In general, I recommend that you sightsee and then do the marathon because after you've done the marathon, sightseeing is so good. Bike camps are a little bit different for sure. Okay, so let's get a running list. So you've been to the Pyrenees and we know you've been to Mallorca. Where else have you been like adventure on your bike?
Yeah, so I've done some other cycling trips in Spain, in Cantabria, which is also a beautiful part of the country in the north, in the Canary Islands, which is also awesome. I know you were in Tenerife recently. I was on Gran Canaria, which is a big island, but there's also lots of great climbing there. Also Slovenia, which was a little different, but also a beautiful place to ride. And of course, now we know there are some top Slovenian cyclists out there. So that's where they train. Yeah.
Very cool.
But yeah, I've also there's I don't know George Hincapie does a Gran Fondo every year. He started doing one in Colombia, where I know he has family, and I don't know if that's still running, but I did that one year. That was awesome experience. Riding in Colombia is also an amazing place for cycling.
So when I hear Colombia, and like for the folks at home, don't get mad, but I know that some of the places like South Latin America, once you get out of off the beaten path, it could feel like a little sketchy. I'd be curious, which place felt like the most, like there's dangers on a bike, right? I'm on the side of a mountain and it's straight down and it's cold and it's dark and whatever. And then there's this sort of places where you're like, oh, I don't think I'm going to wander off to any stores today. I think I'm just going to stay right here by my guide. I'd be curious to know for you, like, what was the place where you felt like it was the super safest place to be? And which place were you like, does that ever, and if that's the case, did that ever affect your decision making going forward? You take that into calculus, right? It looks beautiful, but maybe not a place I want to discover on my own.
Yeah, I think definitely Colombia has its own history, but certainly there are places where it's very safe to travel there. I think like any place, there can be crime in the bigger cities and things, but out where we were riding, small towns in the mountains, I felt safe. But yeah, I think it was helpful being with an organized group, not just totally out on my own. Maybe I wouldn't have been as comfortable because I wouldn't have known where to go. I think there's some places maybe it's easier just to go and figure it out on your own. But yeah, Colombia is one place it was great to be there as part of a group.
Yeah, for sure. I think also there's the benefit of a group for like exploring. Yeah. Right? And then there's a benefit of a group like what I'm hinting at, which is, hey, like how safe do I feel kind of wandering off and doing stuff? Like I get that. I think the reason why the camps are great is like what's the right phrase? Like the explorations that like you would normally probably just go straight on this road, but the guide or the group says, go right. And you're like, what? And then there's something amazing there, right, that you wouldn't have seen. In terms of choosing camps, I'd be curious to know, are you choosing places because of the places you want to go? Are you like Slovenia, or was that just happen? Did you stumble across Slovenia because you're like, I've got a week available in this month and the only camp is Slovenia? Like, how do you go about selecting those opportunities?
Yeah. For me, the real motivation originally and why I got into cycling in the first place is just that it's an awesome way to see the world, to have new adventures. And I like the idea of going to new places that I don't know. I know, there are folks who like go back to a place every year, to Mallorca or whatever, every year, and I can see that's great too, because you know your way around, you feel at home there. But to me, I like the feeling of exploring a new place. And then it's, I think also partly just what's available, what works with my schedule. And is there a sort of organized group that I can go with? To me, one of the advantages of an organized training camp or an organized trip of some kind is it allows you to really focus on just riding your bike, because somebody else is taking care of all the logistics and mapping out the routes and all that. And although I enjoy sometimes riding out on my own and figuring it out, there's something nice about not having to think about the logistics and just having it all
Mhm.
worked out for you, and just
Mhm.
focus on riding your bike for a week. And it's so yeah, to me that's a great benefit of having a organized training camp.
Yeah, 100% for sure. So I do recommend that for someone who, if it's your first time to a country, your first time cycling abroad, like doing it in a group, hands down, like totally worth every penny. As you get more experienced, you can probably do a better job of rolling the dice because there's like experience, like perhaps geographically located. If you keep going by Tamarika, at some point you're like, I know where I want to go, but also just travel experience. So, if I run into an issue, I know how to solve it because I've thought about it or I have solved it into my experience. So I'd love to click into that a little bit as well. What are some of the go-to things that you do that other people would probably pick up on? Like, for example, before I check out, it's always, do you want to spend, or 10,000 people have opted to spend $74.17 on travel insurance. Do you want it or not? And I'm always like, I just spent like $1,200 on this plane ticket. I'm like, do I want to spend $74 for travel insurance? Like, So looking to you as someone who's done a fair amount of travel, would be curious to know what are some of those takeaways. Do you click that insurance button? And what other buttons are you clicking or not clicking that we should know about?
Actually, I've never bought travel insurance, and
Okay.
part of the reason is when you look at the fine print, oftentimes the terms under which you can use it are fairly limited. It may not cover, say, if you like have an injury that prevents you from cycling or something. I don't know that
Right.
travel insurance is necessarily going to cover that. They'll cover things like if there's a family emergency or something. But
Right.
so I generally haven't done that, and fortunately that's worked out for me so far. But
All right.
but I think yeah, there is a lot of preparation that goes into
Mhm.
preparing for a trip, and it's different than preparation, say, for a race or for an Ironman event, which
Mhm.
is tends to be very prescribed. And I think when you're preparing for a week long training camp, you don't know what the weather is going to be like, especially if you're riding in the mountains. So you have to prepare for sort of a number of different scenarios.
Mhm.
Sometimes you don't know in advance exactly what you're going to need. And so to me, yeah, just to be prepared for a variety of different scenarios is in terms of weather and other things is important. And I tend to bring my own, even if I'm renting a bike, I tend to bring my own pedals and seat,
Mhm.
because at least then I feel more comfortable. I have some, I think that's often a big question too, is do you bring your own bike? Do you rent
Oh,
a
right.
bike? I can see advantages to both, and I've
Mhm.
done both. But I think even if you're renting a bike, yeah, bringing your own seat and pedals, and there's always little things like bringing your Garmin device and also the little thing that hooks it onto the handlebars, and which
Yes.
is easy to forget.
Yes.
And so all those little details I think are important.
I agree. Like for sure, like the charging cables, like those are a pain. But if you have Di2 and it's the original Di2, and so the new charger is different than the old charger, they're not going to have the old charger in Spain to pick up. And they're also not going to have Amazon Prime dropping it off later on this evening with a drone. So definitely making sure that's on your travel checklist for sure. Yeah, huge, super huge. I also recommend whatever you do cycle with, I would bring like you can always get a helmet if you need to get a helmet. Like as most of these places you go, there's a bike store you can get a helmet if you had to get a helmet. But
Yeah.
for sure, like your pedals, your shoes, some kit, and like all the fundamentals you need to ride so that if your suitcase is delayed, you can at least get out and ride while you're waiting for the rest of your gear to show up. We've had campers in the past, their stuff's delayed 2 or 3 days. And you can, depending where you are, you can cobble stuff together, but it's just not the same as having some of that. So that's like a big time saver for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right. So other travel questions in terms of the flights and things like that. Do you have any sort of like general travel advice? For me, I always try to pick an aisle seat because I need to stick a leg out at some point in time. Like it drives me crazy. And I feel like planes are just getting smaller and smaller as we go. So that's one of my key things. And I also have to go to Trader Joe's or somewhere and buy like a ton of snacks because I need to be fed every 2 hours, like a like some kind of caged animal. I don't do well with the whole hey, after 4 hours you get a cookie, and then 4 hours later, oh no, we landed at 7:57, so no more cookies for you. And I'm like 8 hours, like with one snack, like who lives like that? So those are my key things. But are there other sort of things that you do that help make your trip, like these long haul trips and things like that, just more manageable?
Yeah, I agree. Definitely on a long flight, an aisle seat is sometimes on short flights. I like the window seat because especially if you're traveling
Mm.
somewhere new, you get to see the view.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
most of the time, if you're traveling across the Atlantic to go to Europe, it's not much to
Hmm.
see. So better to sit in an aisle seat. I
Hmm.
think the other challenge is how do you deal with after you arrive with jet time change and jet lag and all that. I actually like to get a flight that leaves a little earlier in the evening and
Okay.
hopefully arrive in Europe at my destination early in the morning. And then
Okay.
I usually take a nap of an hour and a half or something. So at least
Okay.
I feel like I got some sleep. May depend. Personally, I can't sleep on an airplane sitting up in a seat. So to me, at least to be able to take a quick nap when I arrive, and then I think just staying active that first day helps you to
Mm,
get acclimated. And
yes.
then usually after that first night, I try and stay awake till that first night.
Yeah.
And then after a good night's sleep, then I'm feeling a little more normal.
Yes. Those are all good tips. I would also add to that, I'd say, like, you may be in a country with like awesome food and awesome beverages, but you may want to refrain on that first day, to your point. So you get a good night's sleep. So then you'll be properly recharged the next day. That's a lot of times I'll find out that people are like, oh, I'm still experiencing jet lag. And at least for me, it's pretty rare to have bad jet lag going east to Europe. It's a fairly easy transition. Coming back is always worse. It always has been for me. But when people are experiencing pretty decent jet lag going towards the east, I've found that it's usually people who to stay out late and have fun. Oh my God, we made it. We're in Slovenia. Let's go out. Let's meet a bunch of people and have a ton of fun and get to bed at 2 in the morning because that's 10 o'clock my time. That's totally fine. And then unfortunately they set themselves up for a couple bad days, which is no good. No good at all.
But to me, the good news is that I think being active is to me the best cure for jet lag. And obviously, you don't want to overdo it on the first day, but especially if you haven't slept. But being outside, being active, I think just helps your body to acclimate to the
Yes.
new time zone, when the sun comes up and goes down, and all that.
Yeah, 100%. And even then, being intentional or as intentional as possible about easing into your plans. I think one of the other decisions we haven't talked about is like who you travel with. There are some companies that are like totally recreational. Other companies are like pretty serious. They're like, hey, we're going from point A to point B, and we're supposed to ride 20 miles an hour. If you're not riding 20 miles an hour, we're not waiting for you. We got a whole group. And you're like, what do I do now? I had a flat tire, or it was windy, or I was tired, or something like that. So I think understanding a little bit more about the group that you're going with can help set some good expectations for like all the things, not just the ride itself, but like all the things. I don't want to stereotype people, but the folks who tend to be more serious, they're pretty hardcore about all the things. Hey, we said dinner started at 6. You're at 6:15. What are you doing? Like, we're starting a presentation now. You're like, what? I thought this was vacation, right? And other people, you're like showing up at 6 and they're just like, hey, no, it's awesome. Sorry, we got stuck. We were sampling some cheeses and we got caught up. So here we are. Sorry, it's 7 o'clock, but let's go. I think there's some form of crossover there as well. I'm not sure what your experience has been in that regard.
Yeah. I, I would say it partly depends on what your goals are for the. Yeah, to me, there's a difference between, say, a training camp versus like a cycling tour or something. And you could do both. You can have a very challenging cycling tour that also serves as training. But I think, yeah, it's partly depends on what you want to get out of it. Yeah, there's, if you're moving to a new place every night, it's great to be able to see a lot more, but that also has its disadvantages too, in that you have to pack your stuff every morning before you get on the bike and all that. Where if
Hmm.
you are staying in one place and then just doing rides out from there every day,
Hmm. Hmm.
that allows you to just settle in a little more. And to me, I think that's more comfortable. And I think if you're really doing a training camp, that's an advantage because you can really just focus on the training and not have to worry about too much of the logistics during the week. So I
True,
think,
true.
yeah, like the Mallorca training camp was great to be able to just, there's so many places that were easily accessible within a day's ride that we could just stay in one place but yet have a variety of different rides throughout the week.
No, yeah, exactly. Like, I think to your point, I think there's also not just the seriousness of the trip, but also the type. Is it a stay and play kind of place, or is it one of those tour sessions where it's like, hey, every day we're going to be in a new city? Like, I always warn people like that sounds awesome, but then you've got to go to a new city like every day. And so that means like either you're riding to the city or there's a transfer or there's some other version of that, which can be pretty tiring after a while, right? Okay, it's day 4. I wish I could just sleep in today, or come back and take a shower instead of come back and get into a van. Have you done like a tour like that, like a sort of consecutive days in new places or some version like that?
Yeah, I had. So yeah, when I did that trip in the Pyrenees, that was like that. We were in a new place every day, and it was great because we got to see so much. But yeah, it is a little challenging because you have to get up in the
Mm-hmm.
morning and pack everything before you even get on the bike, and yeah, that
Mm-hmm.
does get exhausting by day three or
Mm-hmm.
four.
Yeah,
So
that can be super, super tough.
yeah,
Uh,
so but again, I think it comes back to what your
mm.
goals are too.
Okay. Okay, super, I agree with that for sure. What else, as you think about planning ahead for travel and so on, like how, in terms of, because obviously it's expensive, right? So you got to save up to go, and you've also got to deal with flights and stuff like that. When you set your mind to something, how do you like, how do you structure, I don't want to say the work, but like, how do you structure the planning, right? Are you like, oh, if I want to do X, like 6 months ahead of time, I need to start, or 3 months ahead of time? Is there an annual process you follow, or like when you're planning your season, or is it something different? I'd be curious to know about that aspect.
Yeah. I think, yeah, definitely it's something you have to think ahead in advance, and particularly if you have a whole a season mapped out with races and things, it's important to have that mapped out. Depending on, yeah, if you are going with an organized group, sometimes you have to sign up way in advance, or
Hmm.
things get booked up. So I think just mapping out a race for the season, you'd want to include a training camp there too, and probably at least a few months in advance have it start booking, signing up, looking at flights and that sort of thing. To me, I think the advantage of a training camp early in the season, yeah, the trip in Mallorca, I also did a similar thing in Canary Islands, I think in March, the March before I did Ironman Lake Placid. And that
Okay.
was awesome because I really felt, I don't know how much of this was psychological and how much of it was real, but I felt like it really gave a whole boost to my whole season just to have that volume, that huge amount of volume early on in the season. But yeah, that was something I'd mapped out in advance when I was looking ahead for my whole season.
Okay. I do, like, in general, I do recommend that people do that. I know it can be hard to plan that far ahead, but I think it adds structure. So when I think about mapping out a season, say, oh, my race is in August, then I've got all this time to get ready for August. So what do I want to put inside those buckets? And inside the team here in Endurance Station, we always talk about, okay, we have lives, we've got to do regular training, but where's the where's the bigger stuff, whether it's races or in this case, like doing a training camp. And you can do training camp at home, or you can do training camp like we did in Marca, just do like adventure training camp as well. So I always encourage people to think pretty fairly far ahead. So if we're talking about the 2024 season, like January 2024 to December, or about halfway through 2023, you should probably be at least have it on your radar if it's something that you want to do. Typically, the expense for going abroad is about the same as going to a race here in the States. You just distribute the money across a week instead of just having a big day and paying the higher prices for that, the crowded areas and all of those paces. So it's the same, fits into that bucket. But there are some things that you get good at and some things you don't. Like for me, I can't search flights. Like I am literally terrible. I can't tell you the number of times, Mark, that I have booked a flight for the wrong day because I had it open in a tab, but I thought it was a different tab because I had like 80 tabs and they're also tiny. I didn't know. I think they literally created that you have 24 hours to change your flight reason because of me. Because like my wife was like, "Did you book the ticket?" I did. I can't believe we fly on June 17th. She said, "June 17th? That's my mom's birthday. We're not flying then." I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "What happened?" So, do you have like a go-to strategy with that? Are you like, do you have like special websites you follow, or are you just, you know what, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to get it done in 30 minutes. I'm buying the ticket, I'm getting out. How do you approach the logistical side of it?
Yeah, I don't know if I have any great secrets on booking
Sure.
flights, but yeah, I tend to agonize over it a little bit, which maybe is not a totally helpful thing. But I definitely do think about, well, yeah, what's the best route? What do I want to
Hmm.
add any extra time? What are the
Hmm.
best sort of options? But yeah, ultimately, yeah, I don't know if, I guess it's an individual preference too, depending how what your preferences are in
Right.
terms of traveling. So I don't know. I have great. Actually, though, one tip, one flight planning
Okay.
tip I have is, so that I did a training camp in Lake Placid once early on, and so I thought, okay, I'll just book a flight to Lake Placid. I'd never been to Lake Placid before. Of course, there's no
Mm.
airport in Lake Placid,
Okay.
so the flight went to Saranac Lake, a few miles away. And I thought, great. So I packed up my bike and a bike bag and all my gear and all that. I didn't
Hmm.
realize that there was a connecting flight from Boston to Saranac Lake in this tiny little four-seater plane. And and they had no luggage space, so they literally put the luggage in the wings of the airplane.
Oh my
And
God.
I had my bike bag, which of course
Right.
wouldn't fit in the airplane wing. So we
Okay.
had to like put the wheels in one wing, put the rest of the bike frame in the other wing, and somehow we managed to get it in there. But I thought, yeah, it would have been nice if they told me when I booked the flight that I was going to be flying on this little four-seater plane.
Like that's like there should be like an asterisk there. This plane is either the smallest plane you've ever flown on, or also the biggest. Right? Either way, you would want to know what you're getting into.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I do
But
know that story is not uncommon. I've heard of a few other people with Lake Placid getting into that boat for sure. That's definitely worth talk to the organizers kind of thing. I'll do that as well to be like, what is this like? Because I just want to set expectations, right? If I get off a plane and walk out and the airport's like literally in the middle of nowhere and there's like two people, I'm like, or vice versa. If I get off and it's a metropolitan area and there's like 9,000 people trying to scream for my attention, I'll jump into a taxi. I also want to know that there's got to be some sort of middle ground for sure.
yeah. So yeah, I
Yeah,
would say check the type of plane you're flying. That's
that's always good for sure. And also obviously just budget all the time. Like we're out of the pandemic window where there was all of this additional hoops to jump through with like vaccine cards and protocols and waiting. But even without that, like international travel is no small feat. But the upside is like you get to go to all sorts of new places and meet new people and try different things, which is super fun. Do you have a way of like capturing? Do you make like some people do like photo albums? I know one of my friends does like a book when he comes back from a place. He'll do the Apple photo book or something. So you can be like, I have a thing from my trip, so I have it. Is that something that you do? Have you cataloged some of these places that you've been, or is it just some of your favorite pictures you hang up, but otherwise more adventure?
Yeah, I always so I am a bit of a photographer in my spare time,
Uh,
so I always take lots of photos and like to share them. I share them on social media and stuff usually, and it's just a fun way to
mhm.
share stuff with folks back home as well, and share with the through the EN channels as well. One of the things I enjoy also on the EN community is just seeing other people's photos from their travels and all that, where they're
Mhm.
training, and it gives you a lot of inspiration and ideas. So yeah, I
Mhm.
try and do that. I don't put together a formal book or something, but it's always great to be able to share, yeah, share
Mhm.
photos from the experience. Mallorca had so many just amazing views that it's made for photographs.
Totally. Even my photographs look good. You take a picture, you're like, oh, that's amazing. I'm like, nope, just point and click for sure. Yeah, Mark is a special place for sure. There's just such, I think the thing that stands out for me about it is there's just such little admin. If you're in France and you want to go ride a mountain, mountains are not usually generally very close to one another. One mountain may be next door to where you're staying, but the other mountain, you've got to get to that mountain. So either you're riding over a mountain to a mountain, or you've got to go around the mountain to get to the mountain, or you get a car ride to the mountain to do the mountain. But in Mallorca, you can just pretty much ride from your hotel and go left to stay flat or go right into the mountains. And there's a density enough that it's pretty good. There's no massive Pyrenean type peaks at all, but it's enough climbing to make it be work. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, it is,
Mm,
and yeah, and beautiful. I just remember some of these twisting roads you would see that just, yeah, create some amazing views.
yeah, totally. Super nice. I also love the density of cyclists. You just can't really go any road you're on, you always see like another cyclist either up there in front of you or they're like back there behind you or next to you. But it's rare to be in a situation where you're the only cyclist like anywhere. Like it's just cyclists have taken over the island, brought a lot of tourism dollars and made a big win. But it's to me, it's just feeling at home. Like, oh, everybody here gets it. Everybody here loves bikes. So it's super fun for me. Okay, so wrap this up. So like you've been to a bunch of places. Like where are you? I don't want you to get you in trouble with anybody who might be eavesdropping, but are you dreaming of, is there another place that you do want to go or you have a bucket list place that you'd like to hit next?
Yeah, I'm intrigued by the Tenerife camp that's on
Oh
the
yeah.
schedule for
Hmm.
next year. Also, I think Andalusia in the south of Spain is another place I'd like to ride more. I've ridden a little there. I actually have family in Almeria, but a lot of the pros train out of the Sierra Nevada, which is in south of Spain, because they
Hmm.
can train in altitude and all that. It's
Hmm.
amazing cycling there, and so yeah, so that's something I'd like to do.
Okay.
Eh, The other thing is I think training camps don't have to be limited to cycling.
Yes.
I've been intrigued by these. Now you see more like the swim trek camps and other kind of like swimming focused camps. And I think, wow, that would be cool to spend a week doing swims in some amazing place around Greek islands. Yeah, I think that could be cool to explore. Oh, a very different way to see a place than on a bike.
100%. Yeah, no, you're right. Like it's like there's some amount of exercise and being active, and then there's like a whole lot of part of, as you're talking about, which is that like adventure place, right? Which is like, hey, how do you just see new stuff, like whether it's new places to go or like a bazaar or whatever. I think that is something to take into account when you're planning your trip, is just how much of that extracurricular stuff is important to you. If you sign up for a camp that's got you riding 80 miles a day, like your Pyrenees trip, that's a lot of time on a bike. That doesn't leave a lot of time for the other stuff. So if you or if you're traveling with your partner, for example, and like the dial's more to exploration and less towards the fitness side, you can find that. You just got to go do a little due diligence, right, to make sure that you've got that balance. I found most places are actually pretty amenable to be active as well. So if you show up to a lower activity tour, but you're like, hey, I want to run in the morning, or to your point, like go for a swim, whether it's a hotel pool or something like that, because you're only riding your bike for 2 hours on a daily basis and you wish you were riding more, like most of those camps will have a way to accommodate you and make it work. But I've always found that I'm never disappointed. Like going in, sometimes I'm like, oh, I really wish I'd done this thing instead of that thing. But when I'm there and when I come home, I'm like, it was still amazing. It was incredible. It's hard to come back from a trip like that and be like, that was just terrible. Like the people are mean and the place was subpar and the food was no good and the guides were jerks. Like it's pretty rare to have some sort of like massive, totally painful experience.
Yeah. And I think it's good to go into it not feeling like you have to hit all the tourist spots or something. To me, just being in a new place, you're gonna, it can be a great experience. And I did actually in Mallorca also take advantage of being right by the ocean, and it's a great place to swim in the afternoon after a ride. A great way to cool off. I think the water temperature was 63 degrees. I didn't see anyone else from our group out there in the water.
I was not there.
I enjoyed it.
Right. Yes. Yeah, I agree. That's the thing where you're like, oh, hey, that looks like a good place to go hiking. Or I think that's what I was getting at. I think a lot of the groups are pretty open to you being adventurous. Aside from that's a military base. Don't go in there. Or something like that is generally pretty good. And to your point, like the other piece about it is, if you are taking that kind of trip, and one of the reasons why we recommend taking a trip is just that you end up blocking off so much time to do that, right? So you see a cycling trip to America and you're going to be riding 4 hours a day. Oh my God, I'm riding all day. But when you come back, you're back by 2:00 and you've got 4 hours till dinner. That's actually a lot of time to explore or be around. And when normally you're at home and you'd be like, ooh, I'm going to jump right onto a Zoom call. Then I'm going to food shop. Then I'm going to go drop off the mail. And then I'm going to walk the dog. And all of a sudden you're like, I'm exhausted. I didn't get a chance to fit it all in, or I'm trying to fit too many things in. So I think the upside of the travel piece is you actually do get some dedicated time to do all the things that you might otherwise not do, which is also it's a luxury if you're fortunate enough.
I think, so I think another thing just to consider is, where your base is, if you're based somewhere for the week. And I think the advantage of Poyensa in Mallorca is a little town. There is a lot that's just within easy walking distance. And so it's a good environment just to relax for the week. So, I think being based in a place that's conducive to that is.
Yeah, that should definitely be part of the calculus. If it's part of your master plan, then it should be part of your master math to make sure you do get that sort of alignment in there for sure. But for now, you get to ride on Skyline Drive, which is a place that some other people, myself included, have gone to explore as well. So you do have the benefit of living next to a monument, if you will, at least here on the East Coast, of good cycling opportunities. Excited for that.
So Skyline Drive is great, and it's a good way to get in some good deal of climbing. It's not. You don't have the long climbs like you have in Europe, but it's a great place to train.
Oh my God. Every time you ride, you're like, oh, we only went 30 miles. And you're like, how much climbing did we do? And you're like, oh my God, like it sneaks up on you in those places. I think that's an easy way to say it, but still beautiful. And you still get that full experience. I think it's a great gateway to seeing if you really do like the exploration and some of the adventure associated with getting out on your bike and challenging yourself, which is like a prerequisite for sure. Awesome. Hey, Mark, this has been great. It's great to sit here about where you've been and what you're thinking. thanks for entertaining on the travel side and getting some tips as well. Sounds like I'm the one who's making all the travel mistakes. I'm the doofus, and you're the one who's doing it all right. So I will strive in the future to make better travel choices.
Great. Yeah, no, this was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Awesome.
Glad to-
And definitely, I hope if you wouldn't mind, DM me after this your place where people can follow you on social media, because I'm sure they'd love to see some of those cycling pictures. And I'm happy to put that in the podcast. So sometimes we can talk about Mallorca or Tenerife and people be like, oh, that sounds great. No idea where that is. But when you see a picture, you're like, ooh, that makes all the difference. Happy to amplify what you're already doing with your photography skills and get other people inspired to get off their butts, pack a bike in a box, and get out to travel the world. All right.
Yeah, happy to share that, and happy to folks can feel free to contact me too. I'm happy to share tips about any of the places I've been.
Oh, fantastic. That'd be good. I'm sure the team would appreciate that. We always have a contingent of people every year who are like, I want to do it. And then as it gets closer, they're like, I'm not so sure. So it's always helpful to have someone who's, no, it's super fun and it's good for you. And it's actually not as hard as you imagine. Here's how you do it. Maybe that'll help tip more people into the adventure category, I hope. So, all right. Awesome, Michael. Hey, you enjoy the rest of your day. Okay. And your 4th. If I don't talk to you before the 4th, be safe, be active. Hopefully the air quality comes around so we can all be outside enjoying it. And I'll talk to you soon. Okay.
All right. Thanks. Yeah.
All right. Take care, Mark. See ya.
Bye.
Bye-bye.